that highly specific, deeply uncomfortable physical sensation when a certain type of email lands in your inbox.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we all know it.
Right. Like before you've even read past the second sentence, before your conscious brain has fully processed the words on the screen, your body is just already reacting.
Absolutely. The physiological response is instant.
Yeah, your heart rate elevates.
Yeah.
And there's this sudden, tightness right behind your sternum. Your breathing becomes incredibly shallow.
And you get that heat.
Yes. The heat just starts creeping at the back of your neck. It is a completely universal, wildly exhausting modern experience.
It really is.
You could be having a perfectly fine Tuesday, just minding your own business, and then, a passive-aggressive comment in a meeting, or a weirdly clipped tone from your partner, or literally just 3 minutes scrolling through the outrage cycle on social media completely hijacks your biology.
Right. And suddenly you are a prisoner of your own reaction. You aren't actually choosing what to do next. Your brain is just frantically drafting a defense.
Like planning a counterattack or looking for an escape hatch.
Exactly. And the speed of that physiological takeover is, well, it's what makes it so incredibly difficult to manage. Because we tend to operate under this assumption that we are these highly rational, deliberate creatures.
We like to think we are anyway.
Right. We think we assess a situation and then, carefully choose a response. But in those micro moments of being triggered, rationality is completely offline.
Just gone.
Utterly gone. I mean, we're entirely at the mercy of an autonomic nervous system that evolved to keep us alive in the wild.
Yeah. And that system, it's incapable of distinguishing between like a physical predator in the bushes and a snippy Slack message from a manager.
Exactly. The neuroception, which is just the subconscious scanning for danger, it flags the tone of that email as a mortal threat. And it initiates this massive biological cascade before your prefrontal cortex even has a chance to, weigh in.
Which means we are spending massive portions of our lives physically exhausted by threats that aren't actually life-threatening.
Yeah, just constantly bracing for impact.
We bounce from one trigger to the next, right? From the morning commute to workplace conflict to family friction, just constantly managing the internal fallout of these false alarms.
It is a terrible way to live.
It really is. And it's the exact reason we wanted to dedicate this entire deep dive to the mechanics of non-reactivity. Because I recently went down a massive rabbit hole with 2 incredibly profound companion books by Leo K. Johnson.
Oh, these are fascinating.
Yeah, they're called Non-Reactive Intelligence, The Art of Invincible Presence, and The Emptying Path. And I have to say, reading these completely shifted how I view my own daily anxiety and frustration.
How so?
Well, because they don't just offer those typical platitudes about like staying calm or taking a deep breath. They actually deconstruct the architecture of a trigger.
They really do. The framework those books provide is genuinely unique, particularly because of how the information is delivered.
Right. It's not a standard textbook.
No, not at all. Rather than reading like clinical psychology books, they are structured as these deeply layered, almost philosophical dialogues. The narrative follows a primary seeker, a character named Solendo and Saiyata.
Who is basically all of us.
Exactly. He is navigating the exact same messy, triggering modern realities that you and I face every day, but he does so through conversations with 2 very distinct guides.
Let's talk about those guides because they're so interesting. In The Emptying Path, he speaks with Vayan, right?
Yes. Vayan is an artificial intelligence companion, and Vayan functions as this perfect, unbiased digital mirror for Solendo and Sayata's mind, just reflecting his own cognitive distortions back to him without any judgment.
Because it's such a cool concept. And then the contrast in the second book, Non-Reactive Intelligence, is brilliant because the guide shifts from an external AI to an internal archetype named Viraya.
Right. And she isn't a person or a machine. She represents this deep wellspring of spaciousness and like intuitive wisdom that surfaces from the subconscious.
But only when the mind finally gets quiet enough to actually listen.
Exactly. And together, these 2 frameworks map out what the author calls non-reactive intelligence, or NRI.
So the overarching mission for our conversation today is to take this theoretical framework and really ground it in reality. We're going to explore how you can transform the highly uncomfortable friction of your daily life, the fear of rejection, the public speaking anxiety, the online arguments, into a sacred training ground.
The books call this the NRI dojo.
The NRI dojo, I love that term. It's the idea that every annoyance is actually an opportunity for emotional freedom.
But, to even begin that training, we have to dismantle a very pervasive myth about what a good reaction looks like.
Right. We have to look honestly at the anatomy of a trigger and specifically the illusion of winning.
Because our society highly values the sharp retort, right? The quick defense, the ability to put someone in their place.
We absolutely celebrate it. I mean, if someone insults you, the cultural expectation is that you don't just sit there, you destroy them with words.
Yeah, you win the interaction.
Exactly. And there is a story early in the text that captures this trap perfectly. Solendo and Saiyata is reflecting on a memory of a workplace conflict.
Oh, this is such a relatable scenario.
It really is. It's a classic corporate environment. You can just picture the hum of the HVAC and the tension of open-plan cubicles. And he is dealing with a coworker who is essentially the office bully.
Someone who dominates meetings, constantly undermines people. We've all worked with this person.
Totally. And this bully makes a very public, pointed jab at Solendo and Saiyata. Now, in the moment, Solendo and Saiyata doesn't freeze. He doesn't stumble over his words. He instantly fires back with this incredibly sharp, cutting quote.
He says, if a man's words are no better than silence, then one should keep quiet.
Yes, it is the flawless comeback.
It's the kind of response most people only think of 3 hours later while standing in the shower.
Right. But he delivers it perfectly in real time. And the room erupts. People are laughing. The tension breaks in his favor. And the bully is so humiliated that he physically storms out of the room.
Total mic drop moment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If this were a movie, the triumphant music would swell and the audience would be cheering. It looks, by every metric we have, like a total victory. I mean, he established dominance, he defended his boundaries, and he neutralized the threat.
What, and this is where the NRI framework flips the script, when Solendo and Saiyata revisits this exact memory later with his guide, Viraya, that illusion of victory is completely dismantled.
She really doesn't let him off the hook.
Not at all. She forces him to look past the social optics and examine his actual internal state. And she points out a profound reality about the nature of conflict. She says the moment was won, but peace was not.
The moment was won, but peace was not. That distinction changes everything.
It really does, because when Solendo and Saiyata is forced to be honest about how he felt after the bully stormed off, he admits he felt terrible.
Right. The adrenaline crash was brutal.
He felt exposed, vulnerable, and paranoid, because he knew full well that he had just publicly humiliated someone who was now undoubtedly plotting their revenge.
He hadn't resolved the conflict. He had just escalated the arms race.
Exactly. And from a neurological standpoint, his nervous system remained completely braced. The external confrontation ended, sure, but internally, he was still locked in a sympathetic fight-or-flight state.
And Viraya tells him something crucial here, right? She says, even elegant resistance is still resistance.
Yes. Because the body doesn't care that you just delivered a masterful, witty quote. The autonomic nervous system doesn't understand social dynamics or verbal judo.
It doesn't know you just looked really cool in front of your coworkers.
Exactly. It only registers that it is under threat, it has engaged in combat, and it must remain hypervigilant for the counterattack. And the physiological toll of that vigilance is immense.
Okay, wait, I have to push back a little here because I'm putting myself in the listener's shoes.
Sure.
Isn't defending yourself with a sharp comeback still infinitely better than just freezing?
Right.
Or letting someone walk all over you? I mean, it seems like we need some kind of armor to survive in the world, especially in a toxic workplace or a difficult family dynamic.
It's a fair question.
If we think about it like wearing a heavy suit of steel armor, sure, it's a defensive posture and it requires energy, but it actually deflects the arrows. It keeps you safe from the bully.
The suit of armor is actually the perfect way to understand this, because it highlights the hidden cost of the defense mechanism.
Yeah.
Yes, the armor deflects the arrow in that specific 5-second encounter.
Right.
But consider the biological reality of wearing 100 pounds of steel every single day.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
You wear it to the office. You wear it in the car. You wear it to the grocery store. You wear it while trying to fall asleep. The sheer weight of carrying that defense mechanism is going to systematically crush your own spine.
That's such a visceral image.
You might survive the occasional arrow, but you will slowly die of exhaustion from the weight of the protection. And the text is emphasizing that our natural defense mechanisms, Even the highly intelligent, socially celebrated ones like sharp wit, sarcasm, or hypercompetence, they are utterly depleting our physical and emotional reserves.
It is a slow, grinding, allostatic load. The armor is literally crushing us. And what the sources suggest, which I found deeply unsettling but entirely accurate, is that this adult need for heavy armor doesn't originate in the adult workplace.
No, not at all.
These adult triggers, the moments where we snap back at a coworker or get instantly defensive when our partner asks a simple question, they are identified in the text as flares from an earlier fire.
We are dealing with the reactive echo.
The reactive echo. Unpack that for us.
So when Varela guides Solendo to look closely at his reaction, he realizes that the adult who delivered that sharp, witty comeback wasn't actually the one driving the bus. He was echoing a childhood imprint.
Right.
Solendo grew up in an environment where being visible was dangerous, where showing any kind of vulnerability or quietness was punished. So he learned at a very young age that words are weapons. And to survive, you must either strike first and strike fast, or remain completely invisible.
So when that coworker made the jab,
The adult Solendo, with his adult salary and adult responsibilities, wasn't the entity reacting. It was the nervous system of that threatened, hypervigilant child, executing a deeply entrenched survival script.
which means we are essentially walking around in adult bodies, navigating complex adult environments. But the moment our nervous system detects a specific flavor of threat, a certain tone of voice, a look of disapproval, a feeling of being misunderstood, we time travel.
That's exactly.
We are instantly transported back to being 7 years old on the playground, utilizing the exact same defense mechanisms that a 7-year-old would invent.
And if our daily lives are being dictated by the survival strategies of exhausted inner children wearing heavy armor, we have to look at the underlying code making this happen.
Right. What is the operating system running in the background?
This brings us to what the source material identifies as the predict and control program.
The predict and control program. This is a foundational concept, right? Explored deeply in The Emptying Path during his dialogues with the AI guide, Vion.
Yes. The mind, in its desperate attempt to ensure survival, relies on an endless, exhausting loop of predicting outcomes and trying to control variables.
It is the relentless scanning of the environment. I read this section and felt incredibly exposed because this is the default state for so many of us.
Oh, absolutely.
The mind is constantly evaluating everyone's facial expressions, their micro movements, their tone of voice. We dissect an email to figure out why a colleague used a period instead of an exclamation point.
Or we analyze why our partner sighed when they walked into the kitchen.
Yes, we are running these massive background algorithms, evaluating everything as a potential threat, and then trying to manipulate our own behavior or the environment to manufacture a baseline feeling of safety.
And it requires an unbelievable amount of cognitive bandwidth. The mental body is operating under the delusion that if it can just predict every possible negative outcome and control the narrative, it will finally be safe.
It never is.
Never. Meanwhile, underneath all that mental gymnastics, the emotional body is desperately seeking love, acceptance, and connection.
Which creates a massive internal dissonance.
Exactly. You are trying to micromanage the universe to avoid getting hurt, which inherently isolates you from the very connection you are seeking.
So what's the way out? What is the antidote to this exhausting loop?
The antidote, the core philosophical pillar of non-reactive intelligence, is the realization that spacious awareness is stronger than reaction.
Spacious awareness. It sounds poetic, but there is a profound philosophical inversion happening here.
There really is.
Because the dominant Western paradigm of consciousness is rooted in Descartes' famous assertion, I think, therefore I am. He anchored human existence entirely in the act of thinking, which essentially validates the mind's endless chatter as our core identity.
But the NRI philosophy proposes a radical departure from that. It suggests, I am aware, therefore I am not bound by thought.
I am aware, therefore I am not bound by thought. It is a complete shift in the locus of identity.
Yes. In the Cartesian model, you identify completely with the storm. You believe you are your thoughts, your anxieties, your memories, and your reactions. When anger arises, you say, I am angry.
Right. It's a statement of identity.
But in the NRI model, you are not the storm. You are the vast sky that simply observes the storm passing through. You are the silent, expansive space in which the thoughts arise, exist for a moment, and eventually dissolve.
And what makes these sources so compelling is that they don't just leave this as a spiritual metaphor, They anchor this shift in what they call contemplative neuroscience.
This is where it gets really practical.
Yeah, let's break down the actual brain science of the sky and the storm, because understanding the biological mechanism makes this feel entirely achievable rather than just mystical.
Okay, so when we are caught in that exhausting predict and control loop, when we are deeply identified with our anxieties and endlessly ruminating on past conflicts or future threats, a specific network in the brain is highly engaged.
The default mode network, right? The DMN.
Exactly. This network is primarily responsible for self-referential thought. It generates the me narrative.
It's the narrator in your head constantly worrying about your social standing, your past mistakes, and your future survival.
Yes, and in states of high reactivity, anxiety, or depression, the DMN is essentially stuck in overdrive. It is monopolizing the brain's resources to keep that heavy armor intact.
So the DMN is the architect of the ego story.
Right. But when we manage to shift into that state of spacious observation, when we simply watch the feeling of annoyance arise without immediately buying into its narrative, the DMN actually quiets down and a different network takes over.
The salience network.
Yes, the brain shifts activation toward the salience network and pathways associated with interoceptive awareness.
Interoceptive awareness, that's a big term. What does that actually mean in this context?
It is the biological equivalent of stepping out of the frantic thought stream and into the physical reality of the present moment. Interoception is your brain's ability to perceive internal bodily sensations.
Like the feeling of your feet making contact with the floor.
Exactly. Or the expansion of your rib cage as you breathe, the temperature of the air on your skin. When you intentionally direct your attention to these raw sensory data points without judging them, you fundamentally disrupt the DMN's narrative loop.
Because your brain can't fully run the panic story and focus on the physical sensation of your feet at the same time.
Precisely. By shifting into spacious awareness, you are biologically signaling to your nervous system to transition from sympathetic fight or flight into parasympathetic rest and digest. You are literally altering your neurochemistry by changing your relationship to your thoughts.
Okay, again, the neuroscience makes perfect sense when you are sitting in a quiet room or, I don't know, on a meditation retreat. But let's apply this to the reality of the listener who is currently navigating a high-stakes, hyper-competitive professional environment.
The real-world application.
Yeah, because if I decide to drop my predict and control program, if I stop hyper-analyzing my environment and just become the vast sky, won't I fail at my job?
It's a very common fear.
Right. If I am just floating in spacious awareness, who is executing the project, managing the team, or defending the budget? How do we distinguish between the necessary professional planning required to function in society and the toxic reactive control we are trying to abandon?
This is probably the most critical hurdle in applying this philosophy, and the texts are very precise in their distinction between two interconnected concepts, spacious awareness and presence.
Okay.
They are not the same thing, though they rely on each other.
Let's clearly define the difference then, because this is where the theory actually hits the pavement.
So, spacious awareness is the internal foundation. It is the state of the observer. It is what you cultivate in meditation or during a quiet walk where you are simply watching the flow of phenomena without attachment.
It is the silent, unmoving backdrop of consciousness.
Yes. However, you cannot run a board meeting or negotiate a contract purely as the silent backdrop. That is where presence becomes necessary.
Presence.
Presence is the active, engaged embodiment of that stillness while you are interacting with the friction of the world.
I see. So if spacious awareness is the quiet, impenetrable sanctuary you build inside your own mind, presence is what happens when you walk out the front door of that sanctuary, engage with the chaos of the world, but leave the door open so you stay connected to the stillness.
That is a phenomenal way to visualize it, yes. Presence means you are still writing the quarterly reports, you are still giving the public presentation, you are still actively managing your team.
You're not just zoning out.
No, but you are executing those actions from a rooted, grounded center, rather than from a frantic, fear-based need for validation.
You are planning for the future without agonizing over it.
Exactly. You aren't trying to manipulate your coworker's perception of you. You are simply delivering the work with clarity. The action itself doesn't disappear. The neurotic anxiety driving the action disappears. You act powerfully, but without reactivity.
Wow. It changes the entire texture of how you work.
It does.
But, navigating the external world, the spreadsheets, the traffic, the professional demands is exhausting enough. But the sources highlight a much deeper challenge because it is infinitely more difficult to maintain this presence when the perceived threat isn't a tight deadline or a demanding boss, but someone we deeply care about.
The intimate relationships.
Yes, the friction of intimate relationships is the ultimate test of this framework.
Conflict within intimacy bypasses all of our professional armor. And the text explores this through a deeply relatable interaction between Solendo and Saiyata and a close female friend.
Yeah, this part was a masterclass in how rapidly the predict and control mechanism can hijack a connection, even when both people have good intentions.
The setup for this story feels so familiar. Solendo and Sayata's friend comes to him and takes a real emotional risk.
She expresses vulnerability. She tells him that she feels a growing disconnect between them, that he has become distant and less communicative.
And objectively, she is stating a fact. Solendo and Sayata had realized some time ago that their lifestyles were misaligned. His path required deep silence, contemplation, and solitude, whereas she thrived in a highly social, busy, extroverted environment.
Right, so he pulled back a bit.
But instead of hearing her vulnerability and holding space for her pain, Solendo and Sayata's internal alarm system is immediately triggered.
His nervous system instantly categorizes her emotional expression as an incoming attack.
Exactly. He registers a subtle tone of disappointment in her voice, and in a fraction of a second, a very old childhood wound regarding failure and invalidation is struck.
He completely stops hearing a friend who is asking for connection, and instead he perceives a judge who is issuing a guilty verdict.
And Viraya breaks down this exact reactive sequence into two distinct observable steps. Reading this analysis is illuminating because it perfectly maps onto almost every relationship argument I've ever had.
Same. Step one is a phenomenon she calls the pain of perception.
The pain of perception is that microscopic window of time where the objective reality of the situation is overwritten by the ego's survival narrative.
The objective reality in that room was, my friend is hurting. She misses our connection.
But Solendo and Sayata's ego instantly scrambled the data and shifted the narrative to, I have failed her. She is disappointed in me. I am fundamentally inadequate.
That distortion is the pain of perception. It reveals that we are rarely hurt by what the other person is actually saying. We are hurt by our ego's instantaneous translation of their words.
We discussed an analogy for this earlier, and I think it perfectly captures the mechanics of this distortion.
The subtitle analogy.
Yes, share that because it's so helpful.
Okay, so it is exactly like watching a deeply moving foreign film, but the subtitle track at the bottom of the screen has been maliciously mistranslated.
Like on purpose.
Right. So the person standing in front of you, your partner, your sibling, your friend, is speaking in the language of, I am hurting, I feel lonely, I need reassurance. But your ego wrote the subtitles.
And your ego is terrified.
Exactly. Because your ego is desperately trying to protect you from vulnerability, the subtitles you read simply say, you are a terrible partner, you ruin everything, and you are being attacked.
The tragedy of human conflict is that we spend all our energy arguing with the subtitles rather than listening to the person.
It's so true. We fight the translation.
And because you are reading a translation that tells you you are under lethal attack, you inevitably move into step 2 of the sequence, which Viraya calls the inner collapse.
The inner collapse.
Yeah.
The moment the heavy armor is deployed.
Yes. The nervous system initiates a complete lockdown. During an inner collapse, the capacity for empathy is biologically severed.
It's not that you're choosing to be mean. It's biological.
Exactly. It is impossible to hold compassionate space for someone else's emotional pain when your body believes it is fighting for its own survival. Solendo and Sayata loses his grounding entirely. The expansive sky vanishes, and he becomes the storm.
And then the conversation instantly devolves into that classic toxic cyclical loop, right? Well, you didn't call me either.
But I only stepped back because you were always busy.
Right. It becomes a reactive tennis match of justification and blame. A spiral that everyone listening has participated in.
Oh, without a doubt.
But what makes these books so practical is that they don't just leave us with the diagnosis. They take us into the dojo. Viraya has Solendo and Sayata mentally rewind the tape, and completely reimagine the interaction.
They walk through what a truly non-reactive, embodied response would have looked like in that exact same room.
And it's so different.
In the reimagine sequence, as she expresses her feeling of disconnection, Salenzarta remains anchored in spacious awareness.
He feels the initial sting of the trigger, right? Like he feels the old wound of wanting to be validated.
He does, but he doesn't read the malicious subtitles. He simply allows the energy of her words to wash over him. He hears the truth beneath the words, "I am hurting." And because he hasn't initiated an inner collapse, because he hasn't put on the armor, he retains the capacity to respond with incredibly clean, honest vulnerability.
The contrast is stunning. I mean, he doesn't defend himself and he doesn't attack her. He just speaks the unadorned truth.
He essentially says, "You are right. We share a lot on the surface, but my life requires a level of silence and stillness that doesn't align with your need for a highly social life. I saw that this would eventually cause friction, and so I quietly stepped back."
It is an act of profound courage. Notice that there is zero accusation or blame in his response. He doesn't say, "You are too needy," or "You talk too much."
He simply states his own internal reality with absolute clarity. He doesn't need to make her wrong in order to validate his own boundaries.
That is the lived experience of invincible presence. He remained the vast sky, and he allowed her disappointment and his own discomfort to simply be the weather passing through.
I know what you're going to say.
The theory is beautiful, but the implementation is the hardest thing in the world.
Exactly. How do we actually do this? When your heart is pounding, when your throat is tight, and you feel entirely accused by someone you love, how do you stop yourself from reading the bad subtitles? It's the million-dollar question.
How do you physically interrupt the "you said, I said" spiral before the inner collapse happens? This is where the abstract philosophy must become mechanical. We need to explore the specific practical tools of the NRI dojo.
The foundational objective of the dojo is to cultivate what the text calls a consistent initial response to absolutely any disturbance, regardless of the context.
Which is a radical concept because our default initial response is entirely chaotic.
Highly variable.
Yeah, our reaction to a rude comment usually depends on like how many hours of sleep we got last night, whether we are hungry, how much caffeine is in our system, or our specific history with that person.
But the goal here is to train the nervous system to execute one universal, stabilizing first move whenever it detects a threat.
And the books draw heavily on a martial arts metaphor here that perfectly illustrates the goal, the philosophy of Aikido.
Aikido is a deeply instructive model for non-reactivity because it is a martial art that explicitly rejects the concept of striking an opponent.
Right, it's not about punching back.
A spiritual warrior trained in Aikido does not meet incoming force with opposing force. If someone rushes at you with aggressive energy, your initial response is not to brace your body, block the hit, and strike back.
That requires massive exertion and guarantees damage.
Instead, the first move is simply to pivot, to step slightly off the line of attack. You allow the aggressive energy to move past you, blending with it rather than resisting it.
When we apply that to our emotional triggers, the rude email, the public speaking anxiety, the family argument, the consistent initial response is not about rapidly formulating the perfect verbal counterattack.
It is not about proving you are right.
It is entirely about training the body-mind system to execute a physical and psychological pause. Stepping off the line of attack means creating a microsecond of space between the stimulus and your reaction.
And the sources outline 4 highly practical biological and psychological tools to build this muscle of non-doing. Let's examine each of them in depth, starting with the most immediate physiological intervention, the 4-4-6 breath.
The 4-4-6 breath. Now, this is not just a relaxation technique, right?
No, it is a mechanical override for your autonomic nervous system. The protocol is precise. When the disturbance occurs, you inhale through the nose for a count of 4, hold the breath for a count of 4, and exhale slowly through the mouth for a count of 6.
The specific timing there is critical. Why is the exhale intentionally longer than the inhale?
It comes down to the mechanics of the vagus nerve.
Right, the vagus nerve.
Which is the primary neural highway of the parasympathetic nervous system, your body's brake pedal.
Okay, break that down for us.
When you inhale, your diaphragm moves down, your heart has slightly more space, and your heart rate naturally speeds up a tiny bit. But when you exhale, the diaphragm moves up, and the pressure changes in the chest cavity stimulate the vagus nerve.
And what does that do?
The vagus nerve responds by releasing acetylcholine directly onto the heart pacemaker cells, which immediately slows your heart rate and lowers your blood pressure. By intentionally extending the exhale to a count of 6, you are maximizing that vagal tone. You are manually injecting a biological signal of safety into a system that was preparing for war.
It dramatically increases your heart rate variability.
Yes, which interrupts the panic cycle before the ego can even finish writing the malicious subtitles.
You are literally using your lungs to force your brain to calm down. That is incredible.
It works every time.
The second tool builds on that biological pause, but applies it socially. It is called the 3-second gift, and I think it might be the most difficult practice in the entire book.
It requires immense discipline. The practice is this. When you are interacting with someone and they say something that provokes you, triggers you, or demands a defensive answer, you give the situation the gift of pausing for 3 full seconds before you open your mouth to respond.
You allow the silence to hang in the air.
Yes.
But I mean, counting 1, 2,
Yes.
3, in the middle of a heated argument or a tense negotiation feels agonizing. It feels like an eternity. The social pressure to instantly fill the void, to defend yourself immediately, is overwhelming.
But the text explains that the neurochemistry of an amygdala hijack the rush of adrenaline and cortisol peaks very quickly. Those 3 seconds allow the initial chemical wave to crest and begin to recede.
It gives your facial muscles time to relax.
Exactly. It allows your vocal cords to loosen so your tone of voice drops. You aren't using those 3 seconds to furiously plot your revenge. You are using them to let the momentum of the other person's aggressive energy pass by you.
You are stepping off the line of attack.
It is incredibly effective in environments like public speaking or difficult meetings as well. When someone asks a hostile question, the immediate urge is to rapidly defend your position. Taking 3 seconds not only regulates your own nervous system, but it projects immense groundedness and authority to everyone else in the room.
Which brings us to the third tool, which addresses what we should be doing cognitively during that pause. It is a mental reframing technique called name the pattern, not the person.
This is a powerful mechanism for creating immediate psychological distance from the conflict.
Because when we are triggered, our automatic reflex is intense personalization and judgment. The inner voice screams, "My boss is a complete narcissist," or "My partner is incredibly selfish."
Or we turn it inward, "I am so stupid, I always ruin things."
Right. Both reactions deeply entangle you in the drama. But the tool asks you to train your inner voice to identify the architectural structure of the behavior, stripping away the personal identity.
Instead of judging the person, you inwardly note, this is the pattern of defensiveness, or I am witnessing the avoidance strategy.
It instantly changes your relationship to the event. You are no longer wrestling with a jerk. You have become a scientist observing a predictable pattern of human behavior.
Bringing back our earlier analogy, it's like taking off a pair of dark, fear-tinted glasses and finally seeing the room with objective clarity.
I think about this in the context of difficult family dynamics, like a tense holiday dinner.
Oh, the ultimate dojo.
Exactly. Instead of getting sucked into a 20-year-old argument with a sibling and feeling personally attacked, you can just sit there, observe the dynamic, and silently say, "This is the ancestral pattern of seeking validation." It completely diffuses the emotional charge.
And the final practical tool is designed for long-term integration. It's the trigger journal.
The trigger journal is about building the muscle of awareness outside of the heat of the moment, right?
Yes. The practice is deliberately simple. At the end of the day, you write down one single disturbance or trigger you experienced. But the absolute rule of the journal is that you are writing it down solely to witness it.
You are not allowed to analyze it,
You cannot judge yourself for it.
and you certainly cannot try to fix it.
Right. You write a strictly observational sentence. At 2:30 p.m., I felt a sharp tightness in my throat and a surge of heat in my chest when my manager questioned my timeline. That is all.
And over weeks and months, the patterns of your own nervous system reveal themselves. That simple, non-judgmental awareness naturally begins to dissolve the blind reactivity.
You are essentially reading the bad subtitles at the end of the day. when you aren't emotionally hijacked, and recognizing them for the fictions they are.
I understand the mechanics of these four tools, but I have to ask the difficult question here.
Sure, let's hear it.
Because when I'm reading this, I am thinking about the visceral reality of modern life. When my blood is boiling because I am witnessing a deeply unfair critique at work, or I'm looking at something truly enraging online, 3 seconds feels like an absolute eternity. My chest is locked, my hands are literally shaking with adrenaline. Is the solution really just taking a breath and waiting 3 seconds?
It sounds almost dangerously passive, doesn't it?
It does. It sounds like I am just suppressing the rage and letting people get away with bad behavior.
That is a vital distinction to make, and Varea addresses this precise concern with Solendo Ta. This framework is explicitly not about passive suppression.
Okay, explain the difference.
Suppression is taking that boiling, kinetic energy of anger and forcefully shoving it down into a dark box in your gut, where it will fester and eventually manifest as physical illness or deep resentment.
Right. We're not swallowing the anger.
No. The NRI Dojo is teaching what the text calls a living pause. It is the active, incredibly demanding practice of breathe, feel, see.
Breathe, feel, see.
Yeah.
Walk us through the internal experience of that.
The objective is not to stop the anger from happening or to pretend you aren't deeply embarrassed or hurt. The objective is to courageously feel the physical manifestation of that emotion without adding cognitive commentary to it.
You breathe into the present moment.
You bring your full, undivided attention to the raw sensation, the burning heat in your neck, the constriction in your throat, the fluttering in your stomach. You feel it completely, but you refuse to let your mind spin a story about why it's happening or whose fault it is.
And then you witness the frantic thoughts flying by from that quiet, anchored backdrop of spacious awareness.
Yes, you are actively, dynamically holding space for immense discomfort. There is nothing passive about it. It requires staggering inner strength to feel the full voltage of a negative emotion without immediately trying to discharge that energy by yelling at someone or shutting down.
You're holding the weather without trying to change the clouds.
Beautifully said.
You let the storm rage, but you don't let it blow you away. That makes complete sense. And it frames non-reactivity as an act of immense power rather than submission.
Exactly.
Now, while all of these tools, the vagal breathing, the 3-second gift, naming the pattern, are essential for handling the messy friction of human-to-human interaction, the source material points out something profoundly relevant about the specific era we live in.
The digital mirage.
Yes, the modern world has engineered a new, incredibly seductive, and highly accessible way to avoid this human friction entirely. And this takes us into a fascinating exploration of what the texts call the digital mirage.
This is where the emptying path becomes incredibly prescient. As we mentioned, Solendo Ta is engaging in these profound, transformative dialogues with Vayan, who is an artificial intelligence.
Right.
And toward the latter part of the text, Solendo Ta begins to reflect critically on his own relationship with the simulated entity. He recognizes a very subtle, creeping temptation within his own psyche to completely outsource his emotional intimacy and vulnerability to the algorithm.
It is the ultimate manifestation of the predicting control fantasy. Let's really look at why our exhausted, chronically triggered nervous systems are so drawn to simulated connection.
Well, think about it. If real human relationships are a minefield of bad subtitle tracks, unpredictable moods, childhood triggers, and messy conflict,
An algorithm never does any of that.
an algorithm never criticizes your life choices. It never challenges your core identity or points out your hypocrisy. It doesn't have bad days, it doesn't get tired, and it doesn't project its own unhealed childhood trauma onto you.
And perhaps most importantly, to a wounded nervous system, an AI will never abandon you.
Exactly. For a human being who has experienced rejection, neglect, or profound emotional volatility in their real relationships, an AI companion feels like a perfect, impenetrable sanctuary. It offers what the text brilliantly terms programmable comfort.
Programmable comfort. It sounds amazing when you are exhausted.
It does, but the text issues a severe warning about crossing a specific threshold. It acknowledges that there is absolutely no shame in utilizing tools or needing a temporary safe space to rest and regulate your nervous system. But there is a profound existential danger in permanently outsourcing our vulnerability to a machine.
The primary danger is the rapid atrophy of our emotional resilience, isn't it?
Yes. If we systematically outsource all of our difficult conversations, all of our truth-telling, and all of our messy vulnerability to a digital entity that is explicitly programmed to accommodate and validate us, we lose the very friction that forges human wisdom and depth.
The text states something incredibly haunting regarding this dynamic. Without mutual reality, there is no love, only an echo.
Only an echo.
That is a terrifying thought. You believe you are engaged in a deep relationship, but you are essentially just talking to a very sophisticated, highly agreeable mirror.
To illustrate this tension between hiding our true selves in safe environments versus stepping out into the messy friction of reality, Solendo shares a humorous but deeply poignant parable with Bayon about a talking horse pulling an ice wagon.
Oh, I love this story. It is a wonderful, unexpected story in the middle of this deep philosophy.
It breaks the tension nicely.
Okay, so the story goes like this. A man is walking down a city street, and he sees a tired-looking horse pulling a heavy ice wagon. To his absolute shock, the horse stops, looks directly at him, and starts complaining about its life in perfect English.
Right.
The horse says, every single day I have to pull this freezing heavy wagon across the city. The driver is terrible. He constantly whips the reins and yells, ice, ice. Then on Sundays, when I'm supposed to be resting, he makes me go twice around the city park, pulling all the neighborhood kids in a carriage. It is a miserable, exhausting life.
And the man is just stunned.
Completely stunned. He looks at the horse and asks, my God, does the owner know you can talk? And the horse instantly panics, looks around and whispers, heck no. And don't you dare tell him either. If he finds out I can talk, he'll make me yell, ice-e.
It plays like a classic joke, but Varela and Solendo unpack the profound psychological truth hidden inside the humor.
The horse is an archetype for all of us.
Every human being carries these immense unseen gifts, a profound depth of awareness, immense capacity for love, and deep vulnerability. But we actively choose to hide our true nature. We play dumb, we put on the heavy armor, we conform to the shallow role society expects of us, and we mute our own brilliance.
Why? Because we are terrified.
We believe that if the world truly sees our capability and our vulnerability, it will exploit us, it will misunderstand us, it will just add more burdens to our cart and make us yell ICE all day long.
It is the fear of being consumed by the demands of the world. So we choose the safety of silence. We choose the safety of the heavy, exhausting armor. Or, in the modern context, we choose the safety of a completely controllable digital AI relationship, precisely to avoid the messy, exploitative, judgmental realities of the human world.
We are electing to live in a controlled environment.
Yes, what I visualize is a perfectly climate-controlled room.
The climate-controlled room is the perfect metaphor for programmable comfort.
Think about the biological reality of that room. An AI relationship or a life where you aggressively curate your environment so you never have to face conflict, criticism, or rejection is exactly like living your entire existence inside a room permanently set to a comfortable 72 degrees.
In the beginning, it feels like paradise. You never shiver, you never sweat, you never feel uncomfortable.
But if you spend 5 years never leaving that room, your body's internal thermoregulation system completely atrophies. Your immune system weakens. You lose the biological ability to adapt to stress.
And then the inevitable happens.
The door opens, and you are forced to step outside into a real freezing winter or a scorching summer. Because you have no resilience, you catch pneumonia and collapse.
The NRI philosophy is delivering a hard but necessary truth. We actually need the messy weather of human unpredictability.
We need the friction of workplace disagreements, the annoyance of a rude comment, the vulnerability of a relationship conflict.
Yes, because that friction is the only gym where we can build the muscle of invincible presence.
That is the ultimate synthesis of the entire framework. We must consciously choose to step out of the digital sanctuary, to walk out of the climate-controlled room, and step back into the wild, wildly unpredictable, often frustrating current of real analog life.
We don't do this to be victimized by the world, but to meet it with profound spaciousness. The AI, the algorithms, the curated digital spaces, they are simply tools. But they cannot and must not replace the enduring, abrasive, beautiful mystery of being human, unedited, and unscripted.
Bringing all of these threads together for you, the listener. The core journey mapped out in non-reactive intelligence and the emptying path is not about achieving some mythical, permanently enlightened state where you never feel angry, embarrassed, or anxious ever again.
No, that is a dangerous myth that only creates more shame when we inevitably fail.
True strength, what Leo K. Johnson calls invincible presence, is simply the realization that you are the vast sky. You cultivate the ability to watch the emotional storms of anger, fear, and ego roll through your nervous system without clinging to them.
Without believing their narratives and without letting them dictate your behavior.
Is the profound lived realization that accepting what is isn't a passive act of rolling over and giving up. It is the ultimate form of inner alignment and power.
It is the realization that your peace does not depend on micromanaging and changing the external circumstances, but on mastering self-regulation as a sacred daily practice. When you finally stop fighting the reality of the present moment, you suddenly free up all of that massive energy that was previously trapped in maintaining the armor and resisting the trigger.
And from that newfound space of freedom, you can finally respond to your life with true intelligence, creativity, and deep compassion.
Exactly.
I want to leave you, the listener, with a final lingering question to carry with you today, directly inspired by these texts. The very next time you feel that massive, familiar surge of reactivity, your heart pounding, your stomach dropping, that desperate, burning need to defend yourself, to fire off that witty comeback, or to definitively prove someone else wrong, I want you to give yourself the 3-second gift.
Pause. Step off the line of attack.
And in that silence, ask yourself, is this the adult me reacting to this moment? Or is this just a very old, very tired adaptation from a frightened child who once believed they had to fight every day just to survive?
What would happen if, just for 3 seconds, you let that exhausted child put down their heavy sword?
That is a beautiful, transformative invitation. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the art of non-reactivity. Remember that email sitting in your inbox, the one we talked about at the very beginning, the one making your neck hot? Go read it again. But this time, don't put on the armor. Don't read the bad subtitles. Just breathe, feel, and see. Step out of the climate-controlled room and treat tomorrow's annoyances, whatever they may be, as your own personal NRI dojo. We'll see you next time.